So let me dive right into some of the questions. And for those of you who are in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to write it down and someone will pass it to me and I'll make sure that I'll find a chance to ask our speakers. But let me get to ask first some of the first few questions. And if you have listened carefully about what Dennis was talking about, his discovery and also his research, and we chatted about that, and I did my own research about Dennis' own work. He actually altogether spent 22 years discovering DNA in blood plasma and also looking at, not necessarily looking at the right area in the first 8 years, but later on got inspired and find the fetus DNA. At the same time, how he applied his findings into developing into a DNA test. That took another 12 years. So I'm curious, I think maybe some of the audience will be curious. Hong Kong is known to be a sort of world-class finance center. When it comes to foundational research that takes decades to reach your goals and pursued, is not something we're well known for. And how has been your experience, I mean, Dennis, when it comes to getting the support from university, but also among your peers to continue to pursue your research, but also believing that this is something that eventually going to lead to something sort of significant and impactful?
Thank you. Now, so my research, as you rightly said, took about 22 years. So actually the first 8 years, I had a wrong idea. So I was thinking of looking at the fetal cells in the mother's blood. But as it turned out, what I was wanting to find is something outside cells, okay? But even though the first concept was wrong, but still, during those 8 years, we make a bit of progress because we are trying to develop technology which are more sensitive, more efficient, etc. And eventually, those 8 years of thinking actually helped me after the actual realization that the material I want is outside of the cells. So that's quite interesting. And of course, actually on retrospect, in a way, I was lucky because during those 8 years, I was actually a medical student. And so I didn't have a lot of resources. So even if I had made the big discovery at that time, I probably wouldn't have enough follow-up power. And so I probably would be overwhelmed. So in a way, it was lucky that I was making a realization at the right time when I have the resources. So I think that what university would need to do is to understand that actually to make fundamental impact, it does take years, if not decades. You know, sometimes, for example, like you look at the Nobel Prize winners in medicine, now the average age is actually 72 years. So imagine that is the sort of time that you take. And so we need to give people enough support, enough time to make important impact. Yeah.
Right. And you brought up a point, and also I think Miles mentioned, it's about the translation of technologies into commercial application or having wider public impact. I mean, how are we doing when it comes to commercialization of innovative ideas and technology that has been groomed and sort of discovered in university environment and taking it out into sort of a commercial environment to let it continue to thrive? I mean, how has that sort of platform or mechanism is working? Is there room for that to be sort of doing better? I mean, because you are one of the few successful cases where we have heard, but we love to see more. And with all the government support you have mentioned to drive more research activity, sometimes it's not just more money, right? Sometimes it's that finding the right thing, but also having someone with that commitment and also vision to take it sort of forward. What do you think of the sort of technology transfer, that aspect, but also maybe Miles can also share your experience?
I think one key area is the understanding of how to protect your own invention. So when I was a medical student, basically nobody taught me how to file a patent. It's actually something which took me 20 or 30 years to try to develop. So now I actually make sure that all the junior academic in my department are actually trained in the art of filing patents and protecting your own inventions. And another thing is to try to make the professor understand that intellectual property is their own property as well. It's not just a deliverable to give to university. So actually now at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, I'm actually involved with the patent committee. So now we have instituted policy in which, in exchange, if a professor is so confident in their own invention, they can actually invest in their own patent in exchange for a bigger share. And actually, we actually find that inventions in which a professor themselves have personally invested actually usually is commercialized quicker and more successfully.
As in the case in the US, I think that's what we're seeing. Maybe I'll turn to Danny. I mean, you talk about sort of your personal journey of starting multiple businesses and now with Prenetics. You talk about something about sort of finding something that is impactful, meaningful, right? And continue applying your entrepreneurial sort of energy and spirit. And you recently, sort of with Prenetics, you've launched circledna.com. Can you talk a little bit about that and how is it going to be impactful, as you mentioned, in terms of your vision and also when it comes to applying technology for human health? What are you trying to achieve and what's your vision?
Sure. Thank you, Irene. So when we started out Prenetics, and we had actually two options. We wanted to either go direct to consumer or go B2B. So basically, when we started 4 years ago, we actually chose the route in terms of going business to business and working with actually large insurance companies, such as Prudential's, AIAs, HSBCs, and providing their policyholders genetic testing solutions so their policyholders can have more healthy, proactive lifestyles, right? So recently, last week, we actually launched our own direct-to-consumer testing platform called CircleDNA. So this is a platform where individuals and users can actually directly order consumer genetic testing online in the comforts of their own home. So certainly, I think in the U.S., this is already quite common with 23andMe, Ancestry.com, Color Genomics, some of the other ones. But here in Asia, it's still very early in the infancy stage. So certainly, I think we're one of the very first platforms to be able to do this at a big scale. Because certainly, what we're looking to do is actually help people understand the power of prevention. Right? But we do know that 80% of chronic diseases can be prevented, up to 40% of cancers can be prevented, but a lot of times people don't know what to do, right? And then so that's what we're trying to help people and educate them. And again, it's less about genetics. I mean, we have a team, a very passionate team that is very focused on health and wellness. So individuals, they start understanding about health by firstly understanding about genetics. We also have health coaches, genetic counselors to help them, guide them, making actionable changes, right? And certainly even from my own sharing, I actually have an increased risk of colon cancer. I'm actually one of the only individuals in the company to have a gene mutation associated with that. So I was 37 years of age when I received my gene mutation that showed that to me. But what I did was then I proactively changed my diet and lifestyle, right? Because I knew I had a higher risk, but if I didn't have this knowledge, I would have certainly waited until age 50 to do a colonoscopy. Certainly we also know half of all colon cancer cases are detected at stage 2 and 3. So in the past 3 years, I've actually lost about 10 kilos. I significantly reduced my own risk by understanding my own genetic makeup. So certainly we want to be able to provide this to the mass market throughout Hong Kong, Southeast Asia, China, on a global basis, making sure that this is simple, affordable, and accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Danny. So let me ask Miles about your company, especially artificial intelligence. I think not a day go by if you read technology section of any newspaper headlines without seeing the word AI. And there's a lot of hype about it. And how much of that real AI technology is being used in larger scale and also true commercialization, I think remains a question, I would say. Maybe, Miles, you can share with us when it comes to commercialization of your technologies, especially in Hong Kong environment. How do you find that in terms of adoption and also in terms of sort of your journey in sort of moving into this space and market and getting people to accept and embrace the technology?
Okay, so in my journey is kind of a little different. So I co-founded the Fano Labs with my PhD advisor. His name is Professor Victor Lee. So he's a chair professor in information engineering at HKU. So at the very beginning, we had a discussion and say, who should be on the front? Should I be doing the CEO's thing, or should he come out and do the company as a leader? So the decision is actually we say I should do it, because what I'm going to do, because what I wanted to do is actually I want to, I've been learning all about technology for the past 10 years. So I said, why don't we come out and I'll try different shoes? Why don't you stand from the point of the users? So instead of thinking about I have this technology, how I'm going to apply it. Now, how about we think about we talk to different people and think about what kind of problems they have, and see if we have a solution. And that's how we started. So in terms of doing AI is actually a very broad sense. It's actually, there's no single technology that's called AI, by the way. There's no single technology that's called AI. It's just a collection of technologies that enables the machine to do things better and more intelligently. That's how the definition in my eyes. So at the end of the day, it's really all about, the way we venture this compliance, quality assurance for call center applications. It's more about this one time I was talking to some friends, some people. I was talking to them, I was trying to learn how you operate. The first thing I talked to a friend is actually he runs one of the government hotlines and say, man, can you tell me about the things that you do every day and see if there's anything I can help you? So he run me through his daily operations. So I said, there's actually this particular place I think I can really help you. And I think the machines can do better than humans. And that's how we developed. And from there, we dip deeper and deeper into what we're doing and improve our values to the society and also to our clients.
So I have been getting a lot of questions from the audience, so I'm going to start sort of going through some of them. Some are quite similar, so I'm going to try to combine. And before I ask this question, it's quite sort of something on my mind as well, is I asked this a lot. Recently, sort of KPMG, we've done a study of the entrepreneurial landscape about Hong Kong with Alibaba Entrepreneurs Fund. And one of the things that we found very interesting is, I would say, a lot of those people who wanted to start their business always started with thinking about what impact I can have on society, much more than what sort of personal gain or wealth I can create and generate. And that kind of resonate what perhaps all three of you were talking about when you started thinking about sort of your business idea and what can you actually affect the society. But I would also say, though, I'm not too sure how much of that among the young people within Hong Kong have that type of mindset when it comes to being an entrepreneur and overcoming obstacles. So I'm going to just ask, sort of feel free to sort of maybe Miles and Danny and even Dennis to talk about, do you think the Hong Kong people, especially young people, have that sort of entrepreneurial DNA and spirit to overcome obstacles and also to persevere? I mean, 22 years of research, and Danny's seeing different business opportunity and venture into something he never has done before. Miles, right? AI, incredibly challenging space in terms of sort of finding the right team and people. What do you think about Hong Kong? And for those of you, right, who might be interested in sort of expanding into Hong Kong.
Yeah, maybe I'll start first. This is from personal experiences. So first of all, if we're doing a startup, if you think about monetary gain, it won't work. Like seriously, when I was just entering job market in 2015, in the global tech giants like Google, the starting salary of a fresh top-notch PhD is about close to $300K US per year. That's actually a starting salary, and that's still more than 3 or 4 times than what I'm making right now in a company. So even after today. So money-wise, it won't work. If you think about anyone thinking about doing entrepreneurship, that just won't work. But and then for things, one thing that I've been observing is when I was just starting the company, when I talked to my friends in the early days, I'm gonna do a startup and teach all the offers. I'm gonna do a startup. They say you're out of your mind. That was actually 3 years ago. But right now, I have so many friends who are actually my students. Everybody's talking about doing a startup. And I think entrepreneurship is not something in the DNA. It's something about ecosystem. It's about inspiration they take. They see a lot of successful cases like Danny's case, like Danny's cases. There are all successful cases in the market. And they think this is something they can do because we're just all humans. And that's actually where students take inspiration from. And that's how we build an entrepreneurial ecosystem.
I know we are very short on time. If I could just ask one more question. We can't talk about advancement and progress without thinking about human capital. And we were just talking about the entrepreneur spirit in Hong Kong. In terms of talent, the skills needed, technology skills, commercialization skills, what do you think about the current sort of talent pool we have in Hong Kong? And do you feel that now, with all these opportunities, do you feel the students are more inspired to embark on the entrepreneurial journey, or they're still very conservative? Because I think that's what we have learned, that living in Hong Kong is tough. I mean, if you don't have a job and have a steady income, you're going to have a hard time finding a place to live. And so how can you make that hard decision?
Actually, from my personal experience, I do think that there is a talent shortage in Hong Kong in this area. Now, for example, when we started our companies, it's virtually impossible to actually get outside people from Hong Kong to actually join those companies. Eventually, we actually have to have some of our students actually joining the company and running it. And also, another thing which we think we're short is that we have a shortage of people who know both the business side as well as the technological side. So I think it's extremely difficult to find a good CEO in Hong Kong in a technology company. So for example, for two of my companies, eventually actually some of those senior people will have to recruit from the US. So I think we really have an urgency to try to train those people.
I mean, I'll actually answer your earlier question too in terms of basically Hong Kong-wise as its place. I actually think Hong Kong youth we actually have a major problem in terms of local Hong Kong people. I think children here, when they grow up, they're actually way too spoiled, right? Because they go through education system, etc., and then their parents don't have them work until after graduation, and then in many ways you're already left out of the market-wise, right? And because if we look at, I think one good thing about the U.S. is that a lot of the children, they actually start working much earlier age, right? And then certainly I also believe, when I was started in 2010, a lot of the parents here, when I was trying to hire, they actually say, hey, don't work at a startup. Why don't you go work at a training program, management consulting, et cetera, et cetera. I do believe that's changing, but it takes more time. It takes much more support in terms of the parents, this generation, in terms of how do you educate your young children to actually start having them work earlier, getting that experience, rather than just everything is about education and schooling, have them take more risks going into working in the startups and supporting their decision to take more risks than just having that conservative route.
So, Miles, any sort of advice? I mean, maybe the last sort of piece of advice I probably want from each of the speaker to audience. If you want to come to Hong Kong, what kind of advice would you give them when it comes to starting your technology business?
Well, my quick advice is actually, if you want to come to Hong Kong in the technology sector, try to work with our universities. So we have really good universities with very good scientists and researchers, students. You want to work with our university for technology transfer. You want to work with us for the talent pool. You also want to work with us for the visions from professors.
Danny?
I think for Hong Kong, Hong Kong's a great strategic location to set up a business, right? And certainly it's not big enough to basically take a product to make it mass market, but if it works in Hong Kong, it's a great sign that it can work in rest of the world. And certainly I think China, there needs to be a certain localization in terms of the product aspects, but certainly I think Hong Kong is a great starting place.
So I think that of 20 years here, I think now actually Hong Kong has finally woken up to the importance of innovation and technology. So I would suggest that if we have any interested party who would like to actually join the party now is extremely good time. Yeah, come.
Thank you, Dennis. What a great way to end. Join the party now and come to Hong Kong. Thank you, all the speakers.